Welcome back, everyone. Well, so far we have all of our HTML elements included here, but now it's time to use CSS in order to style them and look them like what we have here, and also we need to position them in the right place. So first, let's start with that positioning thing. And if we want to learn that, we first need to become familiar with Flexbox and Flex Display. Let's create a new file here, and it's inside images folder. No, not here in our main project. Create a new file here and call it flexbox.html. And this is it. This is our Flexbox HTML. Let's use that HTML5 snippet for that. We first clean these meta tags because for now we do not know what they are. And this is where I want to explain Flexbox in a separate file. The reason that I sometimes use a style tag because I want to have everything inside the file, because you will download these files. I told you how can you access to these files and how to download them. When you download these files, I want you to have everything inside only one file. And besides, this file is not going to go that big. So here I do not use the best recommended way, which is using in a separate CSS file. That is best recommended, and that's what we should use in our project, and exactly that's what I'm doing. I'm having my CSS file in another file for my project, but this is just a temp Flexbox HTML, and that's why I just use a style tag only in this file. So let's get back to our code. Let's create a div here, okay, and I give it a class and call it main container, okay. And notice that I'm using kebab case for my class names. For example, I do not use main with C, with capital C, or use, for example, underline for this main container. I am using single this hyphen case, and I recommend you do this as well. So in this main container, let's imagine that I have some divs and I call them box, and this is box number 1, and I can copy this line of code and hit enter and control V. But in some text editors or IDEs, there's a shortcut for this. For example, if some people is using Atom, in Atom, if you hit Control Shift D, this line will be duplicated, and you don't need to hit Control C and click Enter Control V. That's like a lot of work. But here, Control Shift D actually opens this debug section, and there's a shortcut for this. For example, in VS Code, you can hit Control Shift P and a list of commands come here, and you can search for duplicate section, and when I click on this duplicate section, it duplicates this one, and it does exactly the same thing that I want. I don't want to highlight, Control C, click, enter, Control V. It takes a long time. So I hit Control Shift P, and this duplicate section that I recently used, I can click on this settings, because there are so many commands in VS Code, and I can attach a key binding to this. And what the key binding should be, I can hit Control Shift D, and it's telling me one existing command has this key bind, and I can come here, and for this Control Shift D here, I can use Control Alt D and save this. So that debug thing that we had is now working with Control Alt D, and Control Shift D does nothing, for example, for now. So I hit Control Shift P once again and go to this duplicate line, and again click on this key binding and use Control Shift D for this, and that's what I set for this shortcut from now on. So from now on, instead of copying and pasting everything, I just hit Ctrl-Shift-D and the line will be duplicated, and that's so much easier and faster. So let's rename all of these 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and if I want to have more, I can just use the shortcut that I just created, 7 and 8. These are the shortcuts that I have for now. And these are 8 items inside this main container, and all of them have the same class, and all of them have a class called box. So if I come here and I just want to select this box, anything that has this box class .box should have a background color of, for example, red. Okay, and that's it. And let's go back to our codes, and instead of this index.html, I just want to open that Flexbox HTML. I can just rename it, and you can see our, let's zoom it a bit to 100%, and you can see all of these divs are below each other since they have block display. So that's what happens. So let's select this main container, and I give a display of flex to this. Okay, display flex is something new that we want to learn for now. And this flex, for now, we have seen 3 displays: block, inline, and inline block. These 3 block, inline, and inline block, what they did, they changed the behavior of the element itself. For example, when I say display inline, it changes the behavior of this main container. It changes the behavior of exactly this div here. But when I say display flex, the main container won't be changed at all. The main container itself will be treated like a block element, but the content inside it will be controlled. So the effect is not on main container itself. The effect is on the content inside this main container. So the effect will be applied on all of these main boxes here. Let's go ahead and see what that effect is. And as we take a look, we see that all of these, they are not inline or anyway. Just because the parent element has a flex display, the items inside this will be controlled from this main container when we set display flex. When we set display flex, we have some extra commands that come with this display flex that we can control these these boxes inside this. For example, let's learn a new thing, and this justify content. This justify content, you can see it has so many different values. For example, flex start is something that has the default value. Flex start, it means all of the items should be gathered at the start. And for example, when I use flex end, all the items will be gone to the end part of that div. So that div itself, let's open this. This main container here is now using flex display. That's why we see that purple bordered area. When I remove this flex display, we no longer see that purple, but when I use display flex, we see that extra space. So what happens with flex display is that the div has a space itself. The container, for example, it has 100% of the parent element because div is block, and this div will be treated like a block element. But the content inside this will occupy a space as much as text they have. For example, if it was a longer text, of course it would have occupied more space, right? But the difference is that, let's fix that again, use that space here to and hit enter. No, sorry, not enter. Okay. So what happens is what happens to the extra area? they have occupied that space on the right, and there's an extra space, that purple area, when we can use justify content in order to control that extra space. For example, when we set flex start or flex end, they all go to start or end. And when we say justify content space, for example, there's another value, a space around. When we use a space around, let's hit Control R to refresh the page and hit inspect here and go here. That extra space that we were talking about will be distributed around the elements. So that's why you see that extra space around the elements. We can use, let's go here at this main content, let's go here and change the style. So the space around, we will change it to a space, for example, between. So as you can see, now the space is between the elements, not around the elements. So that 1 is to the left and left, to the very left, and that 8 is to the very right. But when I use justify content around, that 1 and 8 are no longer to the very left and to the very right. There's another thing here where we can go here and space evenly, go hit refresh, and this is space evenly. So it has so many different values. For now, I don't want to cover every possible value. We'll learn possible values throughout the course, and as you can see, it has very different values. But for now, we can just learn this center, or flex start, or flex end, or space between, space evenly. These things is where we are going to start for now. And let's see what does align items do. Let's say, for example, let's go to our code, let's go to our codes and let's give it a height here. And we saw one unit, which where was that pixel. We could use, for example, 100 pixel. Let's learn a new way, and that's VH. VH is a new unit which stands for viewport height. When I say 100 viewport height, it means let's go ahead and occupy 100% of the height. So if I go here and hit refresh, okay, hit refresh, this is now occupying 100% of the space. And why we need to scroll is because that body has a margin by default. Let's see, this has a margin by default. So I can go here, let's go back to our VS Code and select that body and give it a margin 0, so the default margin will be deleted, and this is our content. So now I want to talk about align items. When previously we had no height on this main container, well, it occupied height as much as text it had, because height will be determined automatically every time. But let's imagine that here I have used this 100 VH. What happened was that the height of the element inside this main container, these boxes, are stretched as much as possible. So let's remove this here. You can see that it has been stretched. This behavior could be controlled with align items. For example, I can go ahead on main container, and we saw that justify content is to control the items from x-axis or horizontally, and align items will be used for y-axis, or in other words, vertically. So let's use align items, this align items exactly. And align items have, again, has so many values, and the default value for align items, when by default I mean when we never mention something. When we never mention something is on a scratch on default. It will be scratched. But it has so many other values. For example, start, it won't be scratched. It will be on start. It will be on end, flex end, and we have so many different values: centers, end, and baseline, and everything. They all almost same. They all let's for now focus on center, start, and end. So we can also control the alignment of the items vertically. Okay. So let's sum up what we learned in this session. So in VS Code, we have a bunch of commands, which we can see all of those commands with Control-Shift-P. And well, for now, we just saw and learned one of those commands, which was that repeat line or duplicate line that we had. And we saw that how we can set shortcut key for those commands. But don't forget, if something had some command, some key binding was already associated with another command, so you first need to change the command for other command that we had. For example, we saw that Control-Shift-D was already used for something else. So first we set something for that command, and then we came back to our duplicate line command, and we attached that Control-Shift-D to that. So, Flexbox display is something that will have effect on the content or the elements inside that. And let's mention something else as well. For example, this main container that we had here, well, it was the display flex. So the div itself will be treated like block element, but the content inside it will change. But what if we want this main container to be treated like inline element, but the content will be flex? If we change this display to inline, so the flex display will no longer be available, and all of these are grayed out, which means this justify content center and the height, they are meaningless for an inline element, right? So there's another thing called inline flex, where inline flex is like inline block, like it's like inline block, so it will be treated like inline, so the height is meaning something for that, and justify contents and all of those flex items. So we have a flex and we have an inline flex, and understand the difference between these two. So let's get back to the PowerPoint that we have here, and we saw that VH was a new unit, and these are the new CSS properties that we learned about: justify content and align items. Justify content and align items, they both have so many different values, but for now we saw some of them, and these are actually those we commonly use. And the default value for justify content is flex start, and the default value for align items is on stretch. So that's it, and I hope to see you in next session.